Again, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So as the Torah service was unfolding, I was beginning to point out how the 10 plagues are a highly structured, highly stylized piece of literature. We looked at plagues 1, 2, 3, and we noted, and I shared with you how they fall within a pattern. 1, 4, and 7, 2, 5, and 8, 3, 6, and 9. Each of them noting a different place where Moses and Pharaoh meet up, or in the case of plagues 3, 6, and 9, where they do not meet up. But these kinds of structures can be found in other ways. So, for example, if you look at the plagues in couplets, plagues 1 and 2 are blood and frogs. They're joined together because they both come from the Nile, right? Plagues 3 and 4, the third plague is lice, and the fourth plague is this Hebrew word called arov, which quite frankly, no one knows what it means, but it's some kind of swarmy mess, just like the lice themselves. Then you look at plagues 5 and plague 6, dever and shachin, pestilence and boils, two things which affect the human beings. Then you look at plagues 7 and 8, where you have the hail and the locusts taking care of everything outside of the people, taking care of the fields and destroying the fields and the animals. And then you get to plague 9 and plague 10, darkness and the death of the firstborn. And surely we can see the connection between those as well, as the loss of a firstborn child, loss of any child. Is that not but a darkness that falls upon us? And so we can play this game in a number of different ways. One of my favorites that a teacher pointed out to me in another structure is the first 5 plagues, Pharaoh hardens his own heart. But plagues 6 through 10, it's God that does it. And so, as I said, we have all of these structures that we see within the 10 plagues, but there's one that's not noticed so much. And I think it's not noticed because we have a conception of the story and how it unfolds such that we don't even see the pattern that is right before us. And this is a slightly different pattern. It's 2, 4, 8. It is the doubling of each of these numbers, go from 2 to 4 and to 8. And here we see the following: Moses and his lying. Now you might say, Moses lying? To which the answer is, if one looks at the text, it is very clear that Moses initiates a dialogue with Pharaoh in which he is not being 100% truthful. In the second plague, which we read, the part that we read in chapter 8, Pharaoh, after the plague of frogs has struck, summons Moses and Aaron, says, "Plead with the Lord to remove the frogs from me and my people, and I will let the people go," and listen to this, "I will let the people go and sacrifice to the Lord." Where did that come from? Where did Pharaoh get the idea that all of this was just about the Israelites going out on a little trip to go sacrifice to God? I thought the whole point was to let my people go, not let them go pray some more. And here's the thing. He gets the notion of the Israelites just going out to sacrifice from Moses. In chapter 5, the very beginning of chapter 5, in last week's Torah portion, Moses comes before God. Moses comes before Pharaoh and says, "Let my people go. Let them travel a 3-day journey into the wilderness where we will offer up sacrifices to our God." Moses never says, "Let my people go so that we can return to our homeland." He says, "Let my people go out of town," so to speak, for 3 days. And so when the second plague comes, Pharaoh's like, "Okay, go sacrifice." Then he's going to change his mind. The fourth plague will come and will hit, and he will once again say, "Go out." And this time he's more explicit. Moses will say to him, "Okay, let my people go out, a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices." And once again, Pharaoh will change his mind. And then you get to the 8th plague. And in the 8th plague, once again, it's specific. Once that 8th plague of locusts hits, you think Pharaoh is done. The food of the whole nation has been wiped out. And Pharaoh says, "Okay, listen, I relent. You can go. You go, you offer up your sacrifices to your God, but I tell you what, just the men folk go with you, not your women and not your children." And then he will relent again. and say, okay, all your people can go, but not your flocks, not your sheep. What we see through this repeated acknowledgement of Pharaoh is that what we conceive of happening, that Moses goes before Pharaoh and says, let my people go, is actually not what happens. What happens is Moses goes and says, let my people go for a 3-day journey into the wilderness where we're going to go offer up sacrifices, and we'll be right back. That's the implication. And where did Moses even get this idea that he should lie? From God. In chapter 3 of the book of Exodus, we focus on the burning bush, where God and Moses meet, and where God begins communicating to Moses what God's plans are. And we focus on the great and amazing name that the Torah gives God, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. But a little further on in that dialogue, God says to Moses, and here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to Pharaoh, and you're going to tell him you want to take my people out for a 3-day trip into the wilderness so that they can offer sacrifices to me. And so we see the story of our freedom, of our liberation, is clouded by a lie. And the rabbis can't help but notice this. And they begin asking themselves, what justifies Moses' actions here? How is it? And why would God command Moses to lie? And so they come up with some interesting answers. One answer, the first answer and the most traditional answer, is midah keneged midah, measure for measure. In chapter 1 of the book of Exodus, Pharaoh says, let us deal wisely, nit chachma. Let us deal wisely, shrewdly, cleverly with these Israelite people. And the imposing of slavery was meant to be seen as a tactic to controlling their birth rate. And so the rabbis argue, since Pharaoh tried to be sneaky with the Israelites, so too Moses is now justified in being sneaky with Pharaoh. What do you think? Yeah, that's what I thought too. So then there's another one, and I think you're really going to like this one. One rabbi comes along and he'll say, yes, Moses lied, but not really. Moses said, I'm only going to take the people out for a 3-day trek into the wilderness to offer up sacrifices. Moses never said anything about coming back. And therefore, technically, this was not a lie. You can see where this whole lawyer thing comes from, right? Right? The ease with which they play with the text, amazing. But also, I have to say, not one that I found particularly satisfying. To my mind, the most satisfying commentary and understanding Moses' lying can be found by a rabbi, 19th century rabbi, lived from 1800 to 1865. His name was Samuel David Lusato. He's also known by the acronym Shadal. He was an Italian philosopher, biblical commentator, and philosopher, living in Italy, out of the country which gave us the word ghetto, and was at that time experiencing the unfolding political liberation of people throughout Western Europe. As the emancipation and the Enlightenment took hold, he wrote the following. He simply says, how could Moses have been truthful with Pharaoh? And he leaves it at that. How could he have been truthful? Because what Lusato understands is that in the face of power, the powerless have no recourse. The powerless have no recourse. And picking up on this, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain, notes that this is not just a one-off incident of lying. That if you go back to the book of Genesis, you see Abraham lying, you see Isaac lying, and you see Jacob lying. Abraham will lie twice, saying that Sarah is not his wife, but his sister. Isaac will employ the same lie when dealing with Rebekah when they go down into the nation of Gerar. And Jacob will tell a blatant lie to Esau, who comes to meet him with 400 armed men and will say once they reconcile, please come with me, let us live together. Jacob will say, listen, I can't travel at the pace that you travel at. The women and the flocks and the children will die out. They just can't move that fast. I'll catch up with you. To which he never does. Esau goes in that direction, and Jacob looks and goes in that direction. And so we see all three of our forefathers in the book of Genesis lie. We see Moses lying as well. And perhaps we can begin understanding that which connects them according to Rabbi Sachs, which is in all four instances, they lied because they were faced with powers that they simply could not overcome. Abraham in Egypt facing Pharaoh, Isaac facing the king of Gerar, and Jacob facing his brother, felt in the face of such power, truth was not a wise option. And Rabbi Sachs goes on and he makes the following connection. He notes that in talking about and showing our ancestors lying, the Torah is not seeking to justify deceit. On the contrary, it is condemning a system in which, in order to tell the truth, you put your life at risk. Hence, Moses' lie, as we go through the process of liberation, is so crucial because it teaches us that truth can only be found in a society where people are truly free. Truth is a hard thing to attain, and if we place limits upon freedom of thought and freedom of speech, our ability to work towards the truth becomes hampered. And so in the face of an overpowering truth, we will sometimes defend ourselves by lying because we lack full freedom. We see this playing out in our world on a grand global scale right now. We are at war with radical Islamic fundamentalism. And in case you're wondering, we have been at war at least since 1993. This is a war that only bursts into our consciousness when revolting and terrible things happen, as last week in Paris. But the reality is, we have been under attack, at least to my mind, and this is my bias as a New Yorker, when the first attempt was made to blow up the World Trade Center in 1993, with Sheikh Abdul Rahman and his followers planting explosives in minivans and trying to blow up the parking structure and bring those buildings down. We have been war at a system that fundamentally does not accept the freedoms that we hold dear. And we must fight for and maintain those freedoms. Because in the face of power, the desire and the ability to find truth is at risk. And Judaism is a system about truth. We say that God's seal is a seal of truth. We note that who can stand before God? The one who is without slander upon his or her tongue. And this is why we see that Judaism as a civilization embraces dissent, questioning, and arguing, the very fundamentals of who we are, because it's only with the freedom to do that that we will ever be able to come close to the truth itself. However, I would not leave you with just thinking about this on a political and global scale. The reality is, in our day-to-day lives, we face this challenge. Sometimes we're confronting pharaohs, and sometimes we are the pharaohs. For who is Pharaoh but one who is so willing to exercise his power such that the person talking to him does not feel that he or she can talk freely, honestly, and openly? How many times have we been in the presence of people who, for a variety of different reasons, either their status or their own biases and prejudices, are such that we feel we are unable to honestly share and be truthful with them? And how often have we been the person who has exerted that kind of power, such that we ourselves cut off people from sharing the truth with us because we simply don't want to hear it, because the truth will challenge us. The truth will force us to change. The truth will set us free. And that is one of the scariest things that we all sometimes have to face. And so as we look at this Torah portion, let us look at it as a mirror. Let us look at it as a mirror towards our own world, beyond the walls just of our own lives, in the political environment in which we live, and also the personal environment which we create. Let us be sensitive to those in power and how we ourselves exercise power. And let us always be willing to live in a world and create a world around us that is free, so that we too may all take steps closer to finding the truth. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.